Welcome to Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire, a pro wrestling podcast brought to you by DMV Wrestling at dmvprowrestling.com. Be sure to visit the site every day for the latest pro wrestling news. Thank you for joining us. Hi, I'm your host, Jeff Quinton, and today I'm joined by Dustin Tarr and Les Bowman, who are going to discuss their careers in wrestling as well as their time with Eastern Shore Pro Wrestling. Okay, the first question is, what's your favorite food?
Pizza.
What toppings?
I'm a plain guy. I shouldn't say plain because I guess that'd be just cheese, but I'm a pepperoni guy. Keep it real simple. Just pepperoni and cheese, man.
I'm a pepperoni guy.
Yeah, I'm not one of those guys that puts pineapple on his pizza or anything like that.
What's your favorite drink?
I'm drinking it right now, actually. I'm a caffeine freak. I can't function without it all throughout the day, even just before bed. But right now, I'm hooked on these C4 energy drinks. It's an orange slice flavor, and it's anything with zero sugar, really zero calories, I'll try. But for some reason, the orange slice C4 is like incredibly refreshing, and it keeps me powered throughout the day.
I don't know if you saw the post SummerSlam press conference.
Were they powered by C4?
Yeah, they had C4 for everything for sponsoring that event. And when Cody Rhodes came out, they had the two cans in front of him. He actually did a taste test in front of all the media that was there and recommended the raspberry one of the two he tried.
The raspberry, really? Man.
Yeah, it looked pretty interesting, actually.
I was hooked on the Starburst flavors because I used to love the Starburst growing up, and they have the cherry and I guess whatever flavor the pink is, and I got hooked on those. But after a while, it's too much of a good thing, I guess, and I had to pull myself off of them, and I got hooked on this orange slice. I've always been a big orange juice fan, and I got hooked on the orange slice, and it's just so refreshing, and like I said, powers me all through the day. So.
Been doing Liquid Death water a lot lately.
When I buy water, it's Liquid Death, and I never thought I would buy a canned water, but for some reason, it just tastes so much more refreshing to me. It's something about being in the can. Aquafina water out of the bottle always tasted like plastic to me, and so I just can't do that. And, I mean, Deer Park is fine or whatever, but the Liquid Death water out of the can is so much more refreshing.
And Aquafina is just filtered tap water anyway.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it is.
Moving on, what's your favorite band or musician?
My favorite band of all time, it's a toss-up between Tool and Nirvana. I was a teenager in the 90s, so, you kind of couldn't help being an alternative type kid. A teenager in the 90s, you couldn't really help but fall in love with Kurt Cobain and his whole vibe. And then Tool, I just felt like they were the most talented musicians I'd ever seen. And that's live, ever seen them, the most talented musicians I'd ever seen live, as far as Danny Carey's drum kit is the biggest drum kit I've ever seen, the most extensive, and he's just incredible on it. And I mean, as far as a singer, a rock and roll singer, Maynard is incredible. His range is 8 octave, I'm pretty sure. And as far as talent, pure musical talent, they might be the most talented rock band ever, in my opinion.
One of my friends from high school is a big Tool fan, and she actually goes to concerts when they're in the area. She moved up here from South Carolina, too, just like me, so she goes to all the Tool shows, and she even went to Maynard's Side Projects show recently.
Yeah, Pussifer or A Perfect Circle?
Pussifer.
Yeah. Again, either way, it's a toss-up between, what's better. That anything that he does, it seems, because he's such a talented guy, anything that he does turns to gold. And, I saw a meme recently, actually, as old of a band as Tool is. I saw a meme that was like, there's no such thing as like a fair weather Tool fan. You're either as hardcore gets and you can name their entire catalog and sing through the whole thing, or you have no idea who Tool is. There's no in between. You're not just they're okay.
I'm learning about them from my friend, and also because I graduated high school. We both graduated high school in '92, so I'm right in that same demographic too.
Yeah, you're right in that wheelhouse, man.
I listen to Sirius XM Lithium all the time for my main station on there, so in my car.
Yeah, well, Nirvana and Tool will definitely be on that station.
The next question is your favorite vacation spot.
I love San Diego. And I went out there during my time in the Marine Corps as well and fell in love. And then went out there on a vacation a few times just because it's kind of central to everything out, in the West. I love Vegas. I'm a West Coast boy. It's funny that I live on the East Coast because I'm so much more partial to the West Coast. That's going to be my vacation spots. I mean, just because there's a little bit of everything out there. There's the mountains, there's the beaches, there's the cities there, and the cities are cleaner out there. And and the people are always. I walked into a gym once in San Diego out on the beach, and I was like, it was one of my first times out there. It's like, man, everybody's in such a great mood out here. And the guy at the desk was like, if the sun shined on you 80% of the time, wouldn't you be in a better mood too? I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I would be. So yeah, everybody just seems like they're in a better mood out there. The pace is real nice. Like I prefer west to east.
What's the last book you read?
Whew, I mean, it's definitely a wrestling book. I like autobiographies. I think I've read through all of Jericho and Foley's books at least 3 times a piece. So I'm gonna say it was probably 6-7 months ago I read through Jericho's first book again, just because he came up in the time when I was getting started. He started, I think, in 90 or 91. I started in 95. And so, like, we ran into a lot of the same people. I remember, getting involved in the business, and the first couple people that I had crossed paths with that passed away were, like, friends of his. And so reading stories about them and, like, reliving that stuff, it's for me, that book, his book is incredibly nostalgic, as far as, like, we just, even though he's from Canada, like we're not from the same region or anything, but he's very well traveled, and so we cross paths with a lot of the same people, and like his stories are so similar to a lot of mine, and it's so I've read his first book a handful of times, and I bet you that was the last one that I read, probably 6-7 months ago, something like that. Last book I read all the way through. But I'll read excerpts from stuff all the time.
I like his stories from when he was in Smoky Mountain.
Yeah, and I mean, I worked for Jim Cornette as well, so I definitely have some of those stories.
Especially the Dairy Queen drive-through story.
Yeah, that's a pretty that's pretty spot on as far as like corny at his craziest.
I love the video that I just laughed my butt off when I saw it the first time.
I think I watched it once, and it may have been right after I read that book for the first time, and like recognizing some of the voices that you hear, and I think the camera pans through everybody at some point in time. But it's it definitely, like I said, that story and that video, that's Jim Cornette at his nuttiest right there.
I love the way Jericho was egging him on there too in the video.
Oh yeah, and that's Jericho at his most Jericho right there too. Like he is, he's down. Can we curse on this?
Sure.
He's a shit disturber.
Yeah, I like Jericho for that reason. Even when he disturbs me, I still like it. So, just like Cornette,
Right,
I mean, Cornette's as far apart from me as you could possibly be politically, but I like what he says about wrestling a lot of the times, even when he's saying things that are intentionally screwing people over or messing with people. So, I mean, he just gets a rise out of people, and he starts trending. It's funny, he starts trending on Twitter, and he has no idea why. He has to check in and see, why am I trending?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to kind of love that. There's a romantic side to that, too, where it's like he's so old school that he's not even tuned into all that stuff. I wish I could say that.
I grew up watching Mid-Atlantic in the early 80s with my grandfather, so I'm in tune with a lot of what he says, and that was why I was in tune with a lot of things happened the last show that I saw you wrestle at down in Fairfax with MATW. So,
right on, man.
What's the hardest bump you've ever taken?
Oh gosh. Oh, I would say probably, and it was, good Lord, probably well over a decade ago at this point in time. But top rope to the floor, accidental, but it ended up not looking accidental. There was a spot that I was doing with a kid. I was much more trusting back then, but spot that I was doing with a kid where I go to the top and he does that thing where, and back then Angle was doing it quite a bit, and still doing it quite a bit somehow, but he would jump up to his feet and jump up to the top rope in one motion and kind of suplex him off, and like a belly to belly type suplex off, and I'm standing on the top rope waiting for this kid, and he wasn't as athletic as he had projected to me, and he pops up, and it was, what hurt the most is it was in front of like 10 people, at a National Guard armory somewhere in the Carolinas probably, and he pops up and runs to the top and slips halfway up there and knocks me off the top rope, and he was fine. He didn't fall like I did, but I fell from the ring post to the floor, and it sucked. It was not, it's not the bump that you're not expecting is the one that hurts the most. So, it was, it definitely, it made me, I guess, a little bit more leery about testing everyone's athletic ability and trusting them on what they say they can and can't do.
Okay, and then how did you first get into wrestling?
As a fan or as a worker?
A little bit of both, but mainly as a worker.
Okay, a little bit of both. So wrestling was my escape. I was a child of sexual abuse from age 6 to 13, and it was my escape. I was at like 7 years old, flipping through the channels, and stumbled across Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. It's probably 6:05 on the Superstation, and immediately just fell in love with the real life superheroes in front of me. I was always into the comic book heroes. Always into Marvel and DC, but those were drawings, right? And so I'm flipping through the channels, and I find this escape of like these real life good guys and bad guys, these superheroes, larger than life, that I can literally. I could go to the arena and touch if I needed to, if I needed to see they were real, and I immediately said I want to do that. Like I immediately was like, that's my way out. That's my escape. And I, then was able to lose myself in my own mind for several years until I was able to sneak into a building, right before a show at 14 years old, and helped them set up the ring. And, I got there early enough where it was like, I got there at the same time the ring was getting there. And I just kind of, I guess, like, I was big enough to where I didn't look like a young teenager. And I was suave enough where I could talk a streak even at an early age. So I was able to convince these guys that I was totally qualified to help them set this ring up. And I'm sure they were just looking for help too. So I helped them build the ring and jumped in there like, hey, you want to bump around? Yeah, sure. Jumped in and bumped around. And King Kong Bundy was the top guy on that card. And he happened to be walking in the building at the time that I was bumping around in the ring. And I don't know what he saw in me. I don't know if he saw a kid looking to escape. I don't know if he saw himself in me. I don't know what he saw, but he immediately walks over to me, because I tracked him as soon as he walked in the building, because I'm a huge fan. And so I automatically was like, oh, that's a superstar right there. Bundy, he was fresh off WrestleMania with The Undertaker. So, this was the summer of 95, and they were still able to take third-party bookings and stuff at that point in time. So he may have been still contracted with the WWF and was taking third-party booking. And he walked through, and he grabs me out of the ring, and, who are you? Tell me about yourself. And I started talking, and we started chit-chatting back and forth. And he's like, all right, kid, you're working with me tonight. And not like working with him like in the ring, like I was working for him that night. So I took pictures for him at intermission, and after the show, I did ring robes and programs. I did music. I helped do music. Everything I could do on that first show that he could show me he wanted to show me all the inner workings that he could. He took me out to ice cream and like smartened me up about the business as much as he could. Told me where to go. Told me who I needed to go. Who I needed to go to right from there to get trained, to to work the next show, to work the next town, whatever. Like he immediately started putting tools in my tool belt. Paid me out of his own pocket, which at that point in time was the biggest payday I'd get for a couple of years. He paid me like $150 out of his own pocket that night. As a 14-year-old kid, I was like, oh my God, like this is going to happen every night. No, that is not going to happen every night. And it did not happen for a long time again. And so from there, I just I made my way around the Mid-Atlantic and around, made as many towns as I could for a kid with no license. I jumped in as much as I could. As soon as I had a license to go and get trained, and I didn't tell my parents that I was doing this until I was booked on my first show. And what I did was I just brought them the tickets, and they were like, "What's this?" And I'm like, "I'm wrestling, surprise." And they went to the show, and they're like, "This is what you want to do, huh? Okay, like let's rock and roll then." But yeah, I basically worked the system as much as I could as a young teenager, trying to catch rides to different shows, trying to catch rides to train, putting up rings, carrying ring robes, doing programs, taking pictures. I basically broke in the old school way when the guys from the 50s, 60s, and 70s talk about how they broke in, when they talk about some programs and stuff as young kids or taking pictures or whatever, and getting in the business, getting smartened up that way until somebody was like, okay, we trust you enough. Because back then it was still very much a closed off fraternity. And it was like, kayfabe was very much in existence. We didn't have anything like this. So
yeah, photography is how Heyman and Cornette got into it.
Exactly. So, and it was like, until we trust you, this is what you're going to do. And I got to the point where they're like, okay, this kid's for life. Like this kid. And here I am, 28 years later, still doing it. So clearly I was, or at least I had the sickness. And, but that's how I broke in. I broke in the old school way, with an old school guy, and just never looked back. And he told me very early on, and I mean, he checked in with me until he died. He always, kept tabs and always was very, welcoming to me and made me feel like I was home, much like the Briscoes did. I touched base with them in like 2002 or 2003, maybe something like that. They were still very early in the business, but they had gotten in on the, like, at a high level right away. Like compared to what I did, I felt like, they were going to Japan as teenagers. So they discovered me at Maryland Championship Wrestling, and they did the same thing that Bundy did, really, where they took me around, they trained me up, they helped me get bookings. I was in their barn taking bumps and working with them and getting better and better. And Bundy told me from a very early age in the business to always travel around and get trained by different guys and put different tools in your tool belt. And so that's what I did. I always went around. Went and got trained by the Briscoes, went and got trained by the Maryland Championship Wrestling crew, went and got trained by Shannon Moore and the Hardys and Shane Helms, went and got trained by Taz, and I say trained, but it's like, you get touched up. It's like they're putting finishing touches on you left and right and preparing you for different levels of the game. I wasn't ready for television wrestling until after I'd worked with Shannon for almost a year. He got a hold of me and was like, "You're clearly good, but you look like you could be in the third row. So we got to work on your physique, and we got to get you working." Shannon worked with the WWE at that point. It was 2006 to 2008 is when I worked with him, and he was with WWE at that point. So he's like, "Got to work the hard cam. You gotta know where your cameras are. You got to know where this is and know where that is, and you need glamour shots, and you need this, you need that, and it's preparing. Television wrestling is a lot different than working on the indies. And so Shannon got me ready to do Ring of Honor. And then Ring of Honor got me ready to do Impact. Taz got me ready to do Impact. Like, it was different building blocks, I guess, is what everyone ended up giving me. And that's what you do when you go around putting different tools in your tool belt. That's what you end up with is different building blocks to make you the talent that you will eventually become.
I know I heard about training in the Briscoe's barn back in January because I did a special podcast that was a tribute to Jay after he passed, and I had Ty Awesome and Tiberius Asante talking about it when they trained.
Right. Right. And they, and I think, at one point, and they had, it's funny. So when I first met them, or first became friends with them, I shouldn't say first met them. I first met them early on. I first became friends with them. They would go to Van Hammer's barn, and he had an old Nitro ring in his barn. And we were very spoiled getting to bump around on that thing and getting to work out, on that Nitro ring that bumped like a cloud. The ring that the Briscoes have that Mark still has now today is a ring that me and my brother Chris bought back in like maybe 2007. It was like an old 80s WWE ring. So it was 20 by 20 with no wrestling mat. So it was just the boards and carpet padding. And so that thing bumps like a concrete slab. And so the ring that, like, if you can cut your teeth in the Briscoe's barn is what it turned out to be. Like it ended up being, if you cut your teeth in the Briscoe's barn, you can bump anywhere. Like you're going to be just fine. So yeah, it later on, once the ring moved from, once it moved from Van Hammer's barn to Jay's barn, it was mine and Chris's ring that ended up going there, that they ended up using. And that thing, like I said, it's like a concrete slab. So, and Mark still has it out there to this day. So yeah, that it's a whole different world out there now. But before, we were kind of spoiled.
What are the differences? I know a lot of fans might not understand the differences between the different ring sizes that the different companies have used and how that complicates things or makes things easier depending upon the ring size.
Oh, wow. So typically, in the Mid-Atlantic, you would have smaller rings. Up north in like the Northeast, we'd have bigger rings, 20 by 20, 18 by 18. Down south, it was typically because it was a more athletic style down south. And that evolved throughout the years. Don't get me wrong. That definitely, now the Northeast, like that Northeast style is crazy athletic. And down south, things tend to move a little bit slower. But in the 80s and 90s, like when I was coming up north, it was more the big man style. And down south was more the athletic style that like the Midnights and the Rock and Roll Express would work. So you wanted kind of a smaller, and there were smaller guys. And so you wanted kind of a smaller ring. And that smaller ring, and that the bigger rings in the 80s and 90s would bump a lot harder because they were made for bigger men. They were more heavy duty. The smaller rings would bump a little bit easier, a little bit lighter, and were made for more high flying, more athletic action. It evolved throughout the years. The 6-sided ring bumps like concrete. It's terrible because of the way that the ring is built, because of the way the boards are cut, and because of the way it's put together. It is like the boys at Impact, when they went away from the 6-sided back to the 4-cornered ring, they were very, very happy with that. I got lucky. My week with Impact, we had the 4-cornered ring. Not long after that, when I was done there, they went back to the 6-sided ring, and a lot of the guys threw a fit about it because it is torturous on your body. Like, it's that 6-sided ring, because it bumps like those old school 80s rings, because of the way it's built. Not because it's built for bigger guys, but because it's built and the boards are cut differently and put together differently. It bumps a lot harder. Like it doesn't absorb the impact like a 4-cornered ring does. So all different sizes of ring bump different. The different shapes of ring bump differently. I much prefer like an 18 by 18 ring. Obviously four corners. Like I do not like bumping in the 6-sided ring. It's not fun. I tweeted just the other day. There was a video of AJ flying through that cage, that horrible cage that TNA used to use into that 6-sided ring. And he smacks his arm on the way down on the top of that opening in the cage and then hits that 6-sided ring with no one catching him, even though he jumps in the middle of 4 legends. Not a single person caught him. Whether it was mistimed because he hit the top of the cage, whether everyone thought the other guy was going to catch him or what, he smacks that ring and all shoulder, and it's like my heart like leaps out of my throat every time I see that video because I know how much that hurt. Like that 6-sided ring, bumping in that thing was no joke, and bumping from 13 or 14 feet up, I cannot imagine that. Like, so yeah, my heart's in my throat every time I see that video of AJ bumping in that ring from the top of that cage. But yeah, it all different sized rings and different shapes of ring bump differently because of the way they're built. Back in the 80s and the 90s, which is what everybody goes by in the Northeast, the WBE, those 20 by 20 big man rings were made for TV, and it was made for Saturday Night's Main Event where, is it Dick Ebersol, I believe, he didn't like when they'd hit the ring and they'd pop up, from hitting the ring. He wanted them to hit the ring and stay down. So he wanted that visual for television. He wanted it to look like a street fight when they hit the ground. And so, that's the way those rings were built for those big men. For when you hit the ring, you stay down. It was built more like a boxing ring. And so, it was for the visual on television. They stayed with those rings until the Attitude Era, until the late 90s when they made that change because a lot of the boys were smaller and they're like, they're taking a beating. Their bodies are taking a beating. And so they switched away from those 20 by 20 monstrosities and switched to a more athletic bumping ring. Took a page from ECW and from who used a more mid-Atlantic style ring. That ECW ring bumped like a cloud and you'd pop up 6 feet in the air when you bump on it. It's just the way it was made.
Okay, for my next question, just want to ask you about the wrestlers who were the biggest influences on you, and also which ones you've had the best time working with.
Biggest influence personally, Bundy and Jay Briscoe. And don't get me wrong, like I love Mark to death too. Mark has always been good to me, but Jay and I were closer. Jay and I talked more. Jay and I were, I related more to Jay. And it just an immediate bond. Our styles were more similar. Mark has more of a kamikaze flying all over the place style. So when Jay and I would wrestle, it would feel like a very similar styled fight. Styles make fights, and so when we would work, it would be more of a similar style. And so I would say, as far as my style goes and my my maturation in the wrestling world goes, Jay had as much to do with it as anybody did. But like I said, Bundy broke me in, and so as far as influence goes, he initially smartened me up. Once I, as far as being a fan and my influences that I pulled from being a fan, Bret Hart initially, Steve Austin, obviously, I think everybody pulled from Steve. Guys like, Taz, I love that ECW product because ECW made me feel like I could really do this. Made me feel like I could do it and make money doing it. When ECW went to pay-per-view, they had a TV deal, but lots of places had TV deals. ECW went to pay-per-view and it made me think, oh my God, I could do this and make money doing it. These guys are my size. I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'9", 5'10" on a good day. Taz is 5'8". Taz made me believe that if I could sell myself as the guy who could really fight, if I carved a reputation for myself as someone who could take care of himself and someone who's a legit tough guy, then I could make money doing this too. And it just so happened that I went, later on in life and got, was part of Team Taz and got trained by Taz and was lucky enough to be there with him. And he was, they say don't meet your heroes. I say bullshit. because he was everything that I wanted to be and more. We still text back and forth. He's still, he's that dude. He's everything that, everything you think he is, and then some. Because as he matured, in life, he became more of an approachable guy, more of a mentor. I don't think he could have been as much of a mentor while he was on the road making towns for ECW. He just wasn't in that mindset. Nowadays, he's a different dude. So he's definitely everything you think he is and more nowadays. But yeah, so my influence as far as being a fan, guys like that. My influence as far as being in the business, again, guys like Taz, but also my initial influences, Bundy and Jay Briscoe.
And getting back to your talking about ECW, something I should have brought up to you when we were in books. I've got a book recommendation for you then.
Okay, go for it.
Todd Gordon's book about ECW that just came out recently.
I've heard that it was very good, very insight. I've stayed at that Travelodge. I believe it went from being a Travelodge to being something else when we were doing Ring of Honor out there in Philly, and we stayed there. And so if the walls could talk, I guess. But that famous ECW hotel, man, the stories coming out of that place, and I heard that Todd goes all out with telling all about them.
Yeah, Missy Hyde and Sandman especially.
No doubt. Two people that I've crossed paths with, and they definitely live up to the stories about them as well.
I know. I always heard stories because I lived near Greenville, South Carolina. I was about 30 minutes from there growing up. There's always stories about the one hotel that was behind the old Greenville Memorial Auditorium where Crockett had shows every Monday night, and there were all kind of stories about it.
Oh, no doubt.
A lot of them Flair related, obviously.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's some videos that float around. The boys were, back then in the early days of the camcorders when it was the big monstrosity on top of your shoulder. There's a couple of videos floating around from the arena and the hotels, behind the arena.
And what is your proudest moment in pro wrestling as a worker? That'd be really hard to say. The easy answer is working television. Everybody wants to work TV. Everybody wants to feel like a superstar. That's the easy answer. But that was never the goal. The goal for me, like I'm more about the art, and I wanted to be looked at as a guy who could just flat out go. Someone who could work with anybody. I wanted to be that guy. When the guys are on the road, and they're talking about the really good workers, and you always want to be that guy that's, they bring up when they're like, you ever work with that guy? Yeah, he could work with anybody, man. Like, you never want to be the guy. And I Chris and my brother Scott and I, we tease about it all the time. You never want to be that guy that when they talk about it, it's like, yeah, he was like dragging an anchor. Like, you never want to be that guy. You always want to be the guy who's like, we could work with anybody. That guy could work with anybody. So anytime one of my peers, either posts something about me or, comes up to you after a match and tells you how much either of a fan they are of your work or how easy it was to work with you or whatever, that's a proud moment. Like, the fact that you've honed your craft and carved a reputation for yourself. And I feel at this point in time I have, carved a reputation for myself, and I've honed my craft. But, we have those proud moments where it's like, oh, we made TV. I mean, look, my brothers and I are from a very small area. We're not from the city, from the big city. We're not from, we didn't grow up in an area where it's conducive to, to getting on television, to being big stars at anything, really. Lots of people around here doing the same thing they were doing when they graduated high school. So it's like, we didn't grow up privileged in that way. And so the fact that all of us have made TV, the fact that all of us have worked Hall of Famers and have honed our craft, and that we've really, I feel like we're looked at when people see their name across some bars on the marquee, they're stoked. They're not like, oh God, it's going to be a long night. Like that. I take a lot of pride in that.
proudest matches, hanging with guys who are megastars in the industry, hanging with guys, or anytime that you're booked anytime that a booker books you against a talent who is the quote unquote the top guy on that card, that booker has a lot of trust in you. Whenever a top guy comes in from one of the big companies and you're booked against that guy, the booker has a lot of trust in you. The owner has a lot of, they put a lot of stock in you. And so that's a proud moment. Anytime that you're across the card from a guy who is fresh off TV or something like that, that you're doing the right things. And it's not that you're kissing the right ass. Certainly not at my level, because that doesn't matter at my level. You know what I mean? Like politics, yeah, there are politics at every level and they suck. But like when it comes right down to it, I don't care what kind of politics you play. The owner does not want to put the top, this top star coming off of TV in the ring with somebody who can't perform. So when it comes right down to it, if the bell rings and you're standing across, and you're the top guy coming into the territory and you're standing across the ring from me, I'm proud about that. Like, cause I know that I earned that shit. I know that I wasn't given that based on whose ass I'm kissing.
And let's flip that question around and ask for your most embarrassing moment.
Fairfax, kind of is up there. I don't know if you follow me on social media or anything like that. I'm pretty open. I'm pretty open book, especially this late in my life. A long time ago, I had a therapist told me. It's funny because I just told this to a friend of mine, but a long time ago, I had a therapist tell me, like, Dustin, you know a lot of people, but very few people actually know you, and that is the truth. But I'm doing a lot better nowadays with letting people in and allowing people to get close and kind of seeing, I guess, exposing myself and being upfront with my issues and stuff like that. And I mean, I have PTSD and I have, I've had trauma, and who hasn't? I feel like everybody's got demons and skeletons and stuff like that. Fairfax in July was one of those moments where I'd recently gone through something that opened up kind of a Pandora's box of issues for me, and I didn't know it at the time, but it triggered me and opened up my PTSD, and I had not dealt with it, and I go into that match in Fairfax that you were at with two good friends of mine, the Horsemen, who are very capable guys, obviously, PQ and CW, incredibly capable guys who you should not. And I guess that, one of the reasons that I didn't feel like it was an issue and I felt like I'm going to be fine out there, it's not a problem, like it's going to be easy, is because they're so capable. And I'm confident in my abilities too, and I'm confident in my brother as well. So I guess I hadn't really thought about it. And I go out there for that match, and just a ball of emotion I hadn't even touched the surface of what was troubling me or what had triggered me. And I go out there, and I don't know the way that I referred to it afterwards when I talked to the boys when they were like, "What happened?" Because one of my good friends, Brandon Day, pulled me aside, and he's like, "What happened?" He actually he pulled me aside into an elevator and stopped the elevator. We were just in an elevator for 30 minutes talking about it, and B Day was like, "All right, talk to me. What's going on?" And I was like, I got a case of the yips. If you've played baseball in your life, you know what the yips are. You're out on the mound, and it's like all of a sudden nothing's going right, and you're in your head, and it's like it's seemingly for no reason, but there was definitely a reason. And I wasn't ready to deal with that, wasn't ready to face it. And I go out there with these two guys who are incredibly capable, and my brother who's also incredibly capable, and my mind went somewhere else. And when you do that in the ring, somebody, like me, I immediately tighten up, and I could have hurt. I was in there with CW at the time, and I snugged up on him without even realizing that I was, because my mind was just in a different place. And I snugged up, and he's like, what is going on with you? And I wasn't hearing him. I wasn't hearing Chris. I wasn't hearing PQ. I wasn't hearing anybody. My mind was just in another dimension. And I it was completely blank. It was like I forgot everything that I had ever been trained to do. And I was just like on autopilot in there and could not wait to get out of there. And by the time my mind snapped back to it, it's never happened to me. This is the only time it's ever happened to me. And and look, I've buried some issues in pro wrestling. Like I have used the business to escape so much and just buried stuff and buried stuff and buried stuff. And this just crept up on me and bit me in the ass at the worst time possible. And poor C-Dub and PQ, I'm sure they were looking at me like, what in the – because, look, they both worked with me. They both know I can go. When we got to the back, CW was like, I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you. I'm not. He had to keep reminding me because I was like, just punch me in the face. Like, I'm a worthless piece of crap. Like, I was so mad at myself. And that's what I kept telling him. He's like, I'm not mad at you. And I'm like, I'm mad at me, dude. Like, I'm mad at me. And, C-Dub and I were very similar. Like, we're very, we keep a lot of stuff down deep. And I think he knew that. Like, he knows that about me. And so he immediately felt like he knew it was up, even though he didn't smarten me up to it. I feel like he knew it was up. And, it was embarrassing, man, because that's never happened to me in the ring. The ring has always been it's like my Valhalla. The ring has always been where I escape things, not where I have to face things or where I met with trauma or where I met with PTSD, which is exactly what happened in this match. Like, as soon as the bell rang, it was like my brain was like, nope, not doing this. And I was gone. And the only thing I could think to do afterwards, I isolate when when I'm hurting, I isolate. And so I isolated for a while. And when I was ready to speak on it, I text each one of them individually. Chris, Brett, Chris, CW, and PQ. Like I text them all individually. And then I sent out a post on Facebook and was like, here's what happened basically. And like apologized to all of them again. And they all were like, you don't need to do that, dude. But I did. I needed to do it for me. Like I needed to do it so it didn't happen again. I needed to address it and get it out so it didn't happen again. And some people might contend that, dude, that's not an embarrassing moment. That's something that everybody goes through. But that's never happened to me in the ring before. Like the ring has always been where I escape my stuff, where I bury my problems, not where I'm smacked in the face with them. And it just so happened that on that night with those guys, where it's like you could work them on autopilot and it still be a great match, I dropped the ball. And not only did I drop the ball, I could have hurt one of them because I don't know my own strength sometimes, and I hit really hard sometimes, and I'm snug in there anyway. Like I'm more prone to being not stiff but snug in a good way because I like that in return. It's the style that was always taught to me. It's the style that I've practiced all my life. So, I could have hurt one of them, and I would have I've never hurt anybody. In 28 years, I've never hurt anybody in the ring, knock on wood, and hopefully I never do. But if I'd have hurt one of them, I don't know that I've been able to live myself. I don't know that I've been able to keep on. I might have had to stop that might have been the last match you ever seen from me because I don't know what I'd have done if I'd have hurt either one of them because they're all like family to me. So. But yeah, that's definitely, man, it was so embarrassing for me and hard for me to swallow, hard for me to admit that, like, in my safest place, trauma creeped in the place that I've felt most safe my entire life, because I've been doing this for longer than I wasn't doing it, if that makes sense. Like I've been doing it for 28 years, started when I was 14. So I've been doing it for longer than I wasn't doing it. Always my safest place. And trauma and PTSD creeped into that place. And I was mad at myself and embarrassed that I let it. But again, thankfully, I was in there with the guys that I was in there with, guys that know me, guys that love me, guys that know my capabilities. And they were all incredibly gracious and loving and forgiving and appreciative and understanding. So even in my most embarrassing moments in the ring, it still turned out to be a positive. We still turned it into a learning experience, if nothing else.
This concludes part 1 of my interview with Dustin Tarr and Les Bowman. Thanks to both of them for being my guest. Join us next time for part 2 when we talk in depth about what happened behind the scenes at Eastern Shore Pro Wrestling. And now for our credits. I'm Jeff Quinton, and I'm the host. Our producer is Scott English. If you'd like to contribute to defray costs of this podcast and receive a mention as a producer in these credits, please contact us at dmvprowrestling@gmail.com. Our production assistant is Josie Quinton. Musical credits are provided in the notes for this episode. Thanks again for joining us, and be sure to visit dmvprowrestling.com every day for the latest pro wrestling news.
Watching your face get smashed with satisfaction. The guest list is full, though there's no room on the list. So pay for a ticket or get pushed from my fist. Oh yeah! 2 tickets to the gun show.